the book people, the sort of learners. I've heard of old sort of family written
Oh yeah.
textbooks, for instance.
Very, very literate people, yes. Highly educated, I would say. And, well, as you know, they held some very important offices in
Right.
England.
Right, barrister,
Yeah,
Middle Temple,
yeah.
right.
And,
So just to sort of circle back down to Will, kind of my question on his schooling and learnedness maybe is a question of whether his upbringing had kind of that Eldred emphasis or whether the Jackson Frontiers emphasis was what shaped him. You,
I think maybe the Eldred did to some extent, but
okay.
among the genealogical papers are letters from one of the Eldreds in England to one of the first Eldreds to settle in this part of the world. And it's fascinating.
Wow.
And I'll be glad anytime to share those with you, John.
Okay, we'll definitely do that. That'll be very fascinating. Will's father, Robert Rutherford, had a brother.
I have no idea.
Something about I think a bachelor uncle that Justice Jackson and thus your mother would have had. But again, I don't know if he was still around by the time your mother is a child.
I don't know. I'm absolutely ignorant about the Jackson ancestry
Uh-huh.
and the Howitt
Okay,
ancestry.
well, we're going to work over...
I have no idea.
Okay. Okay, no, it's...
Other than my grandmother's two brothers,
Okay.
Dan and John Howitt, but I know nothing else about the family further back than that.
Okay. Well, let's move over to her. Unlike your grandfather, she's part of your life. She's somebody you grow up and know.
Yeah.
So, I guess first, tell me her full name. It's Angelina. And is there a middle name she had?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Huh. I hadn't thought about that.
Okay.
But nobody knew her as that. She was always Lina,
Okay.
and I think that's on her marker in the cemetery.
Okay, it's just Lina. Okay. So she's Lina Howitt Jackson. Tell me about her. She was she's your grandma.
Yeah.
And you're growing up
and
in the town. Was she living with you, or?
No. She had remarried
Okay.
a dry goods salesman named Calvin Stickles.
Okay. Do you know when that marriage occurred?
No, you just have to stop asking me these days, John.
I know. That wasn't dates. I mean,
Well, Well, I don't know.
by the time you're kind of coming of consciousness, she's married to Stickles.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And where did they live?
They lived up on, it was then the Lakewood Road, but it's Fairmont Avenue. And heck of a nice house. It's no longer there. It's been replaced by a doctor's office, I think, or something.
Okay.
But he was pretty successful. And,
How far away from the Jackson house on Fairmont
maybe a half mile.
Okay.
It was further west than the Jackson house, up
Okay.
toward Lakewood.
So as you're growing up in Frewsburg, that's where she is,
Uh-huh.
and she's
And
Mrs. Stickles.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, he was making a delivery over at Panama to a store there, and the store was on one side of the railroad tracks from the main highway.
Shuddering about what comes next.
He pulled right out in front of a train. I got pictures of his truck. It was just demolished, and of course he was killed instantly.
Oh boy. Is is it a automobile or a
It was
carriage?
sort of a pickup truck.
Okay,
of
but
that-
motorized.
Yeah. Oh
Okay.
yes.
Oh boy. So she's widowed twice.
Right.
Was the Stickles marriage a happy one as far as
I
you
think
know?
so.
Okay.
They it was. Of course, my grandmother was a Protestant, but he was a Catholic. But there was no
Hmm.
problem in that respect at all.
Did
And
he
had
have children or any first marriage? Or
He
anything?
had a daughter by a previous marriage who lived in Salamanca. As a matter of fact, when I worked for the Republican Press out there, I roomed at her house. They had
Yeah,
a marvelous downstairs apartment. And
What's her name?
Grace Fornes, Forness.
Is she still living?
No.
Okay. Forness.
So, and of course, she was also a Catholic, and so Stickles was buried in the Catholic cemetery at Salamanca.
Ah, okay. And Lina obviously is buried at Frewsburg.
Right.
Okay. Is she buried with Will Jackson?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's right. I hadn't thought about that. Okay. So he's buried in Salamanca. She was born, Lina, in 1867. So she is 60 years old when you're born, and by the time you're conscious, she's no spring chicken.
But
Well-
she was in good health all during my childhood. And in the winter times, it was the house that on the Lakewood Road was big and hard to heat. So she would sometimes spend the winters with maybe a month or so with my Aunt Ella and a month or so with my folks.
This is after Stickles is gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I hate to ask another date question, but ballpark, when was Stickles killed? I mean, do you remember that happening?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I was very young. at the
Okay.
time.
So
And my only memory of him is he had the most magnificent head of snow white hair.
okay.
And I remember being up there, and he would peel an apple for me. And he would do it by going around and around, so it was one
long-
continuous peel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so that probably means you have to be 3 or 4 years old at least if you're able to
Yeah.
sort of have that memory.
Yeah, that would be about right.
That probably has him alive into the early 1930s and not very far into the 1930s
Yeah.
before he's killed.
Yeah.
Okay, so that,
Yeah. That would be.
okay. Just to jump ahead, but to kind of put another moment in. Do you remember when the Bob and Irene Jacksons went to Washington, when they moved from Jamestown to Washington, which is 1934, so you're 7 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
Had his mother been widowed again, and the Stickles thing happened before he left for Washington?
Yes.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was she like, Lina? What's, personality, interests?
Knitting. She was quilting.
Uh-huh.
One winter, I remember when she was staying in Frewsburg with us, she was making flowers out of folded paper. I don't know, just what you call it, but
Origami kind of.
sort of, yeah.
Sort of. Okay.
But this, like for daffodils, it'd be
Right.
wire, and she'd wrap that.
Okay. So an artistic
Yeah,
bend.
yeah.
Was she a reader? Was she a?
I don't think very much so. But she was more interested in housekeeping and cooking. A very good cook.
Okay. Do you know anything about her schooling?
No, I don't.
Okay. Where had she grown up? In Warren, in Warren County?
I don't know.
Oh no. Okay. Okay. Well, that's the Howitt piece, which
Mhm.
you said you don't know.
Mhm.
Okay.
I've got a feeling it was in maybe Warren County.
I've been down in some of the cemeteries there, and there are Howitts of various spellings in almost
Right.
all of them. So it seems like that was,
Mhm.
kind of
That would be my guess, but I
okay.
really don't know.
Okay. What was her style with her children growing up? I mean, as your mother would describe,
Very affectionate, very caring. Yeah.
did she have a favorite? Did she
Well-
spare the rod? Was she a religious person? Any of those kind of.
She was a member of the Eastern Star, and I believe she was went to church, but I don't think she was certainly no religious fanatic.
Okay. Okay. Were they regular church growers during the childhoods? Helen, Ella, Robert.
I think so.
Okay.
I know my mother was very active in the church when I was growing up, and made me go to Sunday school.
Mm-hmm. Are you able to make any comparisons based on what you've heard about Lina versus Will on interest in religion, or kind of who was the religion person in the upbringing of the children?
I would guess my grandmother probably had more impact on the kids than he did.
Okay.
Although that's difficult to say,
Right. Right. I know.
because with my uncle working in the stable with him and so forth,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I think they I don't know, did they float logs down to
Yeah.
Pittsburgh or something?
They
And
floated
I think-
logs.
yeah.
And they rode
So
in the train with maybe a load of logs or horses. And
so
some of that
they
Pittsburgh-
must have been pretty close.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's go right to him. The protagonist of our conversation, Robert H. Jackson. His boyhood, as you heard about it, from your mother, from him.
Very good student, of course,
Okay.
and a real fun-loving,
Okay.
devilish little guy.
Okay.
A real prankster at school. I know.
Was that sort of a smart kid with like too many
Yeah,
electrical
I
volts
think,
in the
I
brain?
think partly.
And so
yeah.
Okay. Was he a trouble for his teachers, or
I don't think so. Not a serious problem.
Okay.
It was just having fun.
Okay.
Yeah. And very active in debates.
Okay.
Very good debater, I believe.
Okay.
And very popular with all the classmates.
Mm-hmm. Was his world the places they lived, or were there travels and other things that kind of
Pretty much Frewsburg.
Frewsburg?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would living in Frewsburg mean coming up to Jamestown with any regularity, or were those really separate places?
Pretty much separate. There was a streetcar that connected them, but
Mhm.
that was it. And of course, cars.
Right.
But there was, no, he was a Frewsberger, not much.
Okay.
Until he finished
Until he's
high school and
right.
then came up to Jamestown
Right.
for a post-grad. But
Right.
he must have commuted.
Yeah, he rode the
Yeah.
streetcar.
Uh-huh.
I think. Would they ever get up to Buffalo? You know, like during your mother's childhood.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not that I remember.
Okay, or Erie, or I mean, I do know about a little Pittsburgh
Mhm.
with his father.
All right. Other than that, I don't think there were many ventures outside of the
Okay.
Frewsburg, Chautauqua County area.
Okay. Were there any people not like them, or was it a community of
Very much
a
like
similar
them.
type?
Very much similar.
I mean, there weren't different ethnicities.
Mm-mm.
There wasn't a real separation between,
No.
you know, like a very rich and a struggling poor.
No,
I mean, it was
all very middle class.
working middle
Mhm.
class, traditional families, Christian
Mhm.
community
Right.
was the world. Okay. Who in his family, if anybody, shared Robert Jackson's intellectual interests? I mean, reading, writing, history, talking, oratory, debate. I mean, was your mother like that? Was Ella like that?
I don't know too much about Aunt Ella really, but my mother was pretty sharp.
Okay.
There was after my, well, when my mother was living alone a little later
Mhm.
in life, there was a guy who used to take care of the yard work for her and so forth. And he once said to me, you know, if there had been equal opportunity for women when your mother was growing up,
Mm-hmm.
she could just as well have ended up on the Supreme Court. She's one smart lady.
That's a really pointed way to make the observation. I mean, I do wonder about that. I get a sense of her from, you know, just a few letters I've seen and so forth as, you know, the same sort of really smart natural talent.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously the world wasn't an equal opportunity world, and a
Mhm.
kind of woman's path was
And
to marriage
it's
and a
not
family.
Yeah, that was.
Was Ella not of that caliber?
I really don't know. She was pretty smart, I think, except in her choice of husbands.
Okay.
but she worked in the Frewsburg post office for almost all the years I knew her.
Okay.
Assistant postmaster, I believe, or postman, whatever.
Had her brother helped her
Mm-mm.
get that government employment, or no?
I don't think so.
Okay.
She did it on her own.
What was bad about her choice of husbands?
Well, he was not too smart. I wouldn't say he was dumb, but he was. Not the brightest bulb in the chandelier or something
Mhm.
like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And
Was she unhappily married? Do you know?
no, I think she was pretty happily married, actually.
Okay.
He worked in a furniture factory and for not much money, so that's why she worked, of course, was to help support
Right.
their daughter and themselves.
Okay. Was Lina financially self-sufficient, or did in her later years did the children have to provide for her?
I think she was left fairly comfortably up until the later years in her life, and then I know Uncle Bob helped her a lot,
Okay.
and
How long was she in good health? I mean, I know she had some illness and a decline near the end of her life, but was she pretty strong health as you knew her
yes,
during your boyhood?
yeah. I used to go up and maybe spend a week with her in the summertime when I was a kid. She had a large lawn and several fruit trees, and so it was a great place to play around.
Mm-hmm. I think she passed away around 1940 or 41. I actually don't.
Mm-hmm.
I know Robert Jackson was in Washington
Right.
by then, and I think he was Attorney General, so that would make it 1940 at least.
And, Dr. Hurwitz's son has given the Jackson Center
Yes,
a number of letters,
I've seen those.
both about his own health and about his mother's.
Okay. Okay, I'd forgotten that those letters also touch on her. What killed her? Lina.
Cancer.
Cancer. What kind of?
I don't know where it started,
Okay.
but eventually it was all through her. And,
Okay.
I believe when it was first diagnosed, she had some surgery in Buffalo, and I think Aunt Irene stayed out there with her for that period of time.
Coming up from Washington, or
Mhm.
from here from Jamestown.
It would have been from Washington at that point.
Okay. Okay. Let's jump to her. That's a perfect next person. Anytime you want to take a break, obviously,
Oh,
I'm counting on you
I'm
to
fine.
tell me. Irene
Uh,
meets Robert Jackson in Albany,
mhm.
and after some courtship, they get married in 1916, and they've been married obviously 11 years. Have 2 kids before you come along.
Mhm.
So, you know, they're at a little bit of different stage in life from your parents, but, you know, how much did you see of them in your boyhood?
Not anything on a regular basis, but all the holidays
Mhm.
were usually together.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really remember too much about her from the early days, my early days.
Okay. Yeah, I want to try to
But-
stay there first, because obviously you get to know her well
Oh yeah,
later.
you bet.
But I want your,
I know,
the
like when she
perceptions-
had us up to the house
Yeah.
for Christmas or something.
Right.
She was
your boyhood
just
memories of her.
yeah, wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were, I know some of them, but what were her interests and?
Music
Skills.
was one.
Okay.
She played the piano and loved classical music. And I think being a supportive wife was one of her real strong points. I think she always did her best to be a good wife.
Mm-hmm. He had what appears to be a very full life outside of the home during his Jamestown years. He's, you know, litigating cases and representing business clients, and he's working phenomenally hard, and he's very good as a lawyer. Plus, he's part of all these organizations
Right.
that, you know, seem to meet regularly and have lots of activities and stuff.
Right.
So was she kind of home alone with the kids a fair amount?
a fair amount, but I don't think she was homebound by any means. I know she had a lot of friends
Mm-hmm. Okay.
in Jamestown. And,
But do you have a sense that he was eating dinner at home more than he wasn't, or vice versa? I don't know quite how to assemble all the.
I really can't say what the.
Right. But you see what I mean? I
Right.
mean, like you think about the Masons and the Elks and the Sportsmen
Mhm.
and the Saturday Night Club
Yeah.
and
But
just
he was
the law practice and the Democratic Committee and.
But he was home quite a bit. For one thing, he had a garden up there,
Okay.
and he spent a lot of time
Right.
gardening.
Uh-huh.
So of course he was home then, and at that,
This is on Fairmount.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Was it called Lakewood or Fairmount in those days?
in those days, it was a Lakewood Road.
Okay. When did
Uh,
that name change?
I don't know.
But after they had gone to Washington?
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay. So it was Lakewood Road?
Hmm.
Okay.
And they owned some land behind the house, and I believe had a small stable and some paddock area there
Okay. Where did they live before that?
on Spruce Street in Jamestown, and I don't know which house.
Okay. And they built the Lakewood Fairmont
Did they?
house,
I don't know.
believe. I
Could
think.
be.
Okay. That's not a little house. I mean,
No, it's not.
and I
No.
think it's the late 20s. So it's around the crash. I don't know if it's before or after, but where'd the money come from, or how and when did they become rich? If that's a fair way to.
From his law practice,
Uh-huh. And how?
and
By what point
He-
had that happened? Was that the move from Spruce to?
I would
Lakewood?
guess so. Yeah, he'd made some money, and he I remember saying that he owed a lot to George Niebank. Yeah, that as far as investing his money
Right,
and so
okay.
forth, he really hadn't done much until Niebank.
Does that mean bank stock or other investments? that-
Other investments, as well as bank stock, I suppose.
Okay.
And the Blair Corporation, he was a major stockholder in that, I would say.
Right. And Jamestown Telephone, I think,
Mhm.
was another stock that he held. So by the time you're sort of a boy and kind of getting your perception of them, did their family circumstances seem different from your own family circumstances?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, right.
I mean, were they
My,
the richest people you knew? I mean,
probably at that point, yeah.
and was there any family resentment or tension? Were they full of themselves in any way?
Oh no.
Okay. Okay.
Never.
Okay. I'm kind of circling back to Ella and her circumstances
Yeah.
versus Bob's circumstances, and wondering if the separation in any way is a resentment thing on her part.
I really don't know.
Okay.
But as I remember it, they were rarely at any of the holiday parties or anything.
Okay. So it'd be the Adams and the Jacksons, not the Springers.
Singers, yeah.
Okay. Were there other extended family or friends who would be
Well-
part of that kind of?
My grandmother's brother, John Howard,
John Howard. Okay.
he was often at the parties, and I know at one point in the conversation, everybody was talking about their kids, and he sat there. Well, let's talk about dogs and cats for a while. He was a character, but it was he who lent Uncle Bob the money to go to Albany Law School.
Tell me about that. Good. Perfect. Why not Will Jackson?
Will Jackson thought his son should be a doctor, and his son didn't think so. He wanted to be a lawyer.
Why not a
And
why doctor versus lawyer as opposed to just a business entrepreneur like Will Jackson himself?
I really don't know, but I think from his experience debating and from reading, and I just think the law held a
Mm-hmm.
good hold on him
Okay.
from day one. Although someone once said that they understood that at one point he considered being a preacher.
Okay.
I don't know. I find that, but
Someone
I don't
in
know.
the
It's-
someone in the family has.
I think my mother said that. And
Can you elaborate on that at all? You know, it's
not
kinda-
really, except that I know he read the Bible regularly in his room at Hickory Hill. There was a well-worn Bible that he read frequently.
What became of the Jackson Bible? Do you have any
I
idea?
have no idea. I have the family Bible, which much of it is faded out now, but recording his birth. And
Do you know if that's the Bible on which he took the oath for various offices?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I'm sure it isn't because my mother had it all those years.
Okay, so it wouldn't have been in Washington.
No, but it's a huge volume.
Okay. So perhaps the Hickory Hill Bible was the Oath Bible? And I'm just
Might have
guessing.
been. I
Right.
really don't know.
Okay. And you remember actually seeing the Bible in the bedroom
Oh,
at
sure.
Hickory Hill?
Hmm.
Did you ever talk with him about reading the Bible?
No.
Okay. I mean, he did, and he quoted.
Oh.
He would quote it. I
Oh,
think he
yes.
kind of had
And
that literary mastery of the Bible.
Right.
He knew what was in there.
absolutely.
And could find a good
Yeah,
biblical phrase
yeah.
to make a point.
Yeah, I think that was a major factor in the development of his style, the King
Right.
James Version.
Right. But is that simply literary, or is it also spiritual?
Spiritual, I think.
Okay.
But he was never, do I remember, his saying anything about spirituality or religion or anything. But he was very private in that respect.
Okay. Did he ask his father for law school tuition help and get turned down?
I think so. Hmm.
Okay.
That was my understanding. That it was he'd help him through med school, but
Not law school.
that was
Okay. And so Uncle John Howitt loans him money or gives him money?
I think it was a loan.
Okay. Was it enough to basically pay the bill for the year?
Yeah, I think so.
So Robert wasn't having to work while he was...
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Did he describe that Albany year? Do you have any memories
Never-
of conversations
never
with him
that
about...
I
Okay.
heard.
Okay. Let's go back just the 2 years before that. Did he ever describe the Jamestown High School postgraduate year?
No. At that point, I was too young to have any interest in it, or he had. There was no reason for him to talk about it.
Well, in 1952, we know that your wedding and the Jamestown High School occasion on which he gives the
Right.
tribute to Milton Fletcher
Right.
are, adjacent days or something. It's part of the same visit
Right.
to Jamestown. So that might have been an occasion on which, he did some reminiscing about
Not,
school.
not with the family.
Okay. And you were busy getting married.
You bet.
Okay. What about the next year? Well, just to finish the thought on Jamestown High School. Anything on Mary Willard, Milton Fletcher, these people who were important forces in his life?
I know there were two Willard sisters, Mary and Vesta,
Very good.
and which one was the one who got him
Well, he
interested in good literature? I'm
that,
not sure.
That was Mary,
I guess.
That was Mary.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew them
Uh-huh.
both. I'm gonna get another tape. He knew them both pretty well. They lived together.
Right.
But Mary was the teacher, and I forget what Vesta did. Testing 1 2 3.
Testing 1 2 3.
This is Saturday, September 28, tape number 2 with Harold Adams. We were talking about the Willard sisters.
Uh-huh. I know from what my mother said that Mary Willard was a major factor in helping him develop his interest in literature and his literary style.
Did your mother herself know Mary Willard? You know, at any point?
I think they
Just-
probably met, but I don't think they were well acquainted.
Okay. So her sense of the importance was from hearing her brother
Mm-hmm.
talk about.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know any of the flavor of what that was? Was it classroom? Was it the sort of after school literary society kind of stuff that she pulled him into?
Rather, that I think so. After school,
Okay.
some of the schoolwork I'm sure was part of it, but mostly I think it was extracurricular interests.
Okay. Do you know if he ever boarded with the Willard sisters?
Not to my knowledge.
Because his home, his mother was, his parents, his father was still alive, were down in Frewsburg, and so when that trolley,
As far as I know,
he did that as a
yeah,
commuter.
uh-huh.
Okay. And Milton Fletcher, I mean, we know obviously how he spoke about him later in life.
Yeah, but I never
Okay.
heard anything about
Okay.
Fletcher.
The next year, after the JHS year, is his first year apprenticing with Frank Mott and Benjamin Dean
Mm-hmm.
in that law office. Did he ever talk about that experience? Or do you have any?
We never talked much about that at all. All I know about it is from things that my mother told me. But,
Okay, well, go ahead.
But
That's
other than that, when we were talking as uncle to nephew and so forth, we were talking about horses and
Mhm. What kind of stuff would your mother tell you about, Frank Mott or Robert Jackson
Well,
as a young law apprentice?
that he rose rapidly from once he was admitted to the bar. He was soon the lawyer in
Mhm,
Jamestown.
mhm. This guy Mott was, I think, by marriage in the Howitt part of the family tree.
Yeah, I understood he was somehow related to my grandmother, but
Okay. Do you know if she was fond of him or close to him?
I don't think they were close, but acquainted, I'm sure, but
Okay.
I don't know of any
Do you know if
close.
Will Jackson had any view of Frank Mott, good or bad?
No idea.
Okay. So then, Jamestown High School, law apprentice, a year at Albany, one more year as a law apprentice, and then he becomes a lawyer, and becomes pretty active in Democratic county politics stuff as a young man.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any stories, his or your mother's, about speech making, campaigning, politicking stuff he did as a young man?
Not a great deal. Of course, Democrats were a very rare breed
Right.
in this area at that time. So I know he was active in the party, but
Okay.
I really didn't hear much about his political
Okay.
career.
He's-
And he really wasn't, in my recollection, I never thought of him as a politician. He never held an elective office.
Mhm, mhm.
He was campaigning for somebody else usually, but
Okay.
not for Robert Jackson.
He, for a year, 1917, 18, I think, he practices law in Buffalo. Do you know anything about that?
The only thing I ever remember about that was he tried cases one after another. He'd spend all day in the courtroom going from case to case, and he had no chance at all. He'd open up the file that they had prepared for him, and that was all the preparation he had.
That's in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And
And I remember saying once, this woman, I guess, had a claim of some sort, and by way of evidence, there was one letter written describing whatever the accident was, and so he said I've forgotten the one word in the thing was misspelled. So in examining the woman, he asked her, how do you spell whatever the word was? And she spelled it the same way it was misspelled in the alleged letter of evidence. So,
to sort of show she created her own
right,
evidence.
absolutely.
Okay.
That's the only thing I know about.
That's a good story. Is that something he told you, or?
Mm-hmm.
It's very good.
But he did none of the preliminary work. It was strictly courtroom, as I understood it.
Right. How did his life work during that period? He was a newlywed
I really don't know.
without kids, and I
Yeah.
can't figure out where Aunt Irene was. If she was with him in Buffalo.
I think she was.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Do you know if she was working? I know
Not
she
to
was.
my
She'd been
knowledge.
some kind of state employee when she was in Albany,
Oh, Oh,
secretary or
yeah.
something. When he first meets her.
uh, I don't know of her ever having worked, but she well
Okay.
could have.
Right. Okay. Or if he, had a room with somebody in Buffalo and she was still here.
That I don't know.
Right. Okay. He kind of moves away from politics for a while as his law practice and identity are really succeeding. Well, why didn't he stick it out in Buffalo? I'm skipping over that question. I mean, why? He seems to have moved up to the big city and then he returns to Jamestown.
I really don't know. I think he just liked Jamestown better,
Okay.
and I think he wanted to get more involved than just opening a file and
Mhm.
having a case in court.
Okay.
He wanted to,
It makes good sense to me. The firm he's with in Buffalo is one of the guys is named Thomas Penny, who's kind of a big, much older than Robert Jackson, lawyer by that point. Is he somebody you ever heard of?
never heard of it.
Okay. It's kind of a Republican firm, and Penny is a Republican former office holder and so forth. So I'm wondering if kind of any of the political fit or lack of fit is part of the decision to. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know much
Yeah.
about the
Right.
Buffalo
Right.
adventure.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Exactly. And then he moves away from politics and really succeeds in Jamestown practice through the 20s. By the later 20s, he's getting back in, and that's obviously Roosevelt's return from polio and his absence from politics in the early 20s, and he gets elected governor and so forth. What kind of figure was Franklin Roosevelt as you're a boy and you're
Well, he was gigantic.
before the presidency, do you have any memory of Governor Roosevelt? And
Not much, although from day one, my mother was, of course, a passionate Democrat.
Okay, right.
She thought Franklin Roosevelt hung the moon.
was that sort of on his own merits, or was it because her brother was part of
Probably
this?
both, but she thought Roosevelt
Okay,
was the man,
okay, okay.
that man,
That
so
man,
to speak.
right. In a friendly way. And what kind of family perception did you grow up with about where Robert Jackson fit into this Franklin Roosevelt thing? I mean, he's president by 1933, so you're only 6 years old. So basically, Roosevelt in Washington and then Robert Jackson in Washington. How does that piece fit in the Roosevelt thing?
You know, at that point, my relationship with Uncle Bob was strictly nephew,
Little kid
uncle,
uncle.
and
Right.
as far as his career,
mean,
now, of course,
now, of course.
how I regret not having
Well,
things that.
yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, if we'd had this kind
Oh,
of technology
yes,
and ability to
right,
capture
right.
stuff, it would,
And I really didn't have any heck of a lot of interest in his career. I mean,
Right.
say, he's
Right.
a good lawyer, great guy,
right.
but we were
Okay.
very close.
Right.
And,
Now, once they go to Washington, what was the expectation? That they'd be back soon?
I think it was initially that he didn't know how long he'd be there, but I don't think he anticipated a
Had they?
lifetime
Right.
stay there.
Did they rent out the house, or was the house just empty?
I think the house, I think it was rented. I don't believe it was sold for a while. But then after he had been down there long enough that he decided he was going to stick around a while,
Uh-huh.
he had left quite a few things in storage at my grandmother's place.
Okay.
And among other things he'd left were a pair of riding boots. And he and I had the same shoe size.
Mm-hmm.
So he said...
Which is what?
9.5A.
Okay.
And I don't know what his were, perhaps a little narrower. It might have been double A. He had small feet, really.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he said to my grandmother, give those boots to Harold when he knew he wasn't coming back up. So I filled Robert Jackson's boots when I was in high school. Then long after his death, when Aunt Irene was cleaning out Hickory Hill, there were quite a few pairs of his shoes, and she said, "You take these." And so I'm probably the only person alive who has ever walked a mile and more in Robert Jackson's shoes.
You got all these lines well honed. I think I'm not hearing them for the first time. Any of those shoes still sitting in the back of any of your closets?
No,
Okay.
I wore them out.
Okay. It would have pleased him, obviously. I think the sale of the house here is the purchase of Hickory Hill. I think that's, the same sequence of events.
Could well be. They lived in Bethesda for a while.
Okay. Did you visit them down there before
No,
Hickory Hill?
No.
Okay.
And then they stayed in the Wardman Park Hotel
Right.
Initially, and my grandmother was down and visited them in the Wardman Park.
But not you.
And, no.
Okay. Yeah, I think they were in the Wardman, and then they rented a house. I don't think they owned it. I think they rented a house in Northwest Washington. I think for Mary's senior year of high school, they had some kind of a farm or some place where she could have horses.
Absolutely. I thought it was in Bethesda, but
Maybe it's. I think
I'm
it might
not
be in
sure,
Bethesda. I
but-
think it's River Road or someplace up there. But those weren't places you visited.
No.
Okay.
I remember his telling once about having a snake, a big snake in one of the trees that he killed. He had a thing about snakes.
Oh, tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that he was really terrified, but
Didn't like them.
yeah, right.
And
they,
he had to kill a snake in a.
yeah, when they were in Bethesda, I'm sure it was. And like when we go for a walk out back of Hickory Hill, which was all open fields then and woods, clear down to the Potomac, I guess. But anyway, he always had walking sticks, and we both carried a walking stick. And I think part of that was in case we encountered any snakes. he was armed.
Right. Was he? I mean, describe him in the woods and the kind of hiking experience.
It was great. I remember he and Mary were up camping at Spring Creek.
Mm-hmm.
They had a tent, I believe, on the Jackson Farm there. And
right.
so he and Mary and I were taking a little hike up the Jackson Hill. And it got to be quite a hike, and the going wasn't easy. And I said, with my great wit, I said, well, as a trailblazer, you're a real attorney. And he laughed. Mary instantly said, what you should have said was, as an attorney, you're a real trailblazer. And whenever he was up, he just loved to take the car and put the top down and drive through the countryside and visit the old family places.
Mm-hmm. Now that Spring Creek land was still in the family. It had just become unoccupied, or what? What was its status?
I don't know. I think it had been sold, but
Okay.
I don't know.
Was the house?
Oh,
The house still there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But and I don't know who owned it at that point, but it had been sold.
Do you know when the house ceased to be?
Mhm.
Okay. Was he always in vigorous health?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I think well, I know he had a health problem in 1941 when he was Attorney General. And it looks actually like it was a heart attack. So, relatively early, relatively young. And then he obviously got well, and I don't think it was diagnosed particularly properly. You never had any sense of him having to watch it or take it easy or conserve himself?
Last years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And, well, they told him, you got to watch your cholesterol, and so you shouldn't have. He had eggs for breakfast every morning. I'm not going to give those up. So
okay. How did he like his eggs?
Anyway, I think.
Okay. How many eggs make for a breakfast? Do you have any idea what?
I would guess at least 2.
Okay. And so, even though the doctor was saying,
Yeah, cut them out. He said,
okay, okay,
I'm only willing to do so much.
right,
It's, if medical technology was what it is today,
right. Yeah,
he'd still be alive probably.
He'd be 110.
Yeah.
I think it'd be pushing it, but I think he would have seen 80.
Oh, I'll bet he would have.
And an extra 10 or more years.
And I'm not sure that Nuremberg didn't take quite a bit of toll.
Okay, you mean physically?
I think the stress
Uh-huh.
was pretty intense.
Yeah, I think that's right. Would he ever discuss that in the years after Nuremberg?
No, he never did, but Aunt Irene felt that it had
Okay. After
taken
he
its
had
toll.
after he had died. Okay. That heart attack, the first heart attack in the winter of 1954, puts him in the hospital for a couple of months.
Mhm.
Do you know anything about the actual circumstances, where he was, what happened?
No, I don't.
Okay. Did you have any sense of how serious the situation was?
Not at that point, really.
Okay.
And he was up just a few months before he died. He was up and with Aunt Irene, and we had dinner at our house, and
Uh-huh.
he
Did
was
he-
very upbeat and
Did he seem himself? You
very
know,
much so.
not washed
Yeah.
out or.
No, he was determined not to slow down.
Okay. So that would be the summer of 1954. The first heart attack is March 30th, and then he's in the hospital till he comes out for Brown versus Board of Education,
Mhm.
which is May
Yes.
17th, and then the court has its summer recess
Right.
beginning in June.
And it was during that recess.
It was during that recess.
Yeah.
Okay. Would that be when he told you about the eggs?
I don't know if he told me, or I almost think that was Aunt Irene who told me about that.
Okay.
So one of our neighbors grew up in Frewsburg, and of course knew who Robert Jackson was and so
Right.
forth. So we had a porch swing at home when they were up that
Mhm.
time, and so this neighbor came over and talked and talked and talked, and all about Frewsburg and all this stuff, and he thought that they would be very familiar with things there. And anyway, when he left and Uncle Bob came back in to dinner, he said, "Who the hell was that?"
Now, where were you living? You're
In Falconer.
in Falconer, okay. And he was on. So he's on your porch swing. Okay. That's great.
So he thought, being both Frewsburgers, this guy felt that, well, they'd have so much in common.
Right. Right. Exactly. He'd been away from Frewsburg a while.
That, I'll say.
Probably wasn't that up on or interested in all the local talk.
I'll say not.
Right. The Nuremberg visit. Let's talk about that. I obviously heard that, but